This is The Naked Life with Roxanne Noor. Hello guys, welcome to the podcast. Today I'm with Jascha Renner. He is the founder of Set and Setting, a psychedelic retreat company. He also created a book recently about psychedelics called Psychedelics in English. Jascha also helps people with education, training, facilitation, but then also being in the retreat space in a setting that's safe, and so people can go deeper into themselves and learn about their inner beings through psychedelics. Jascha, thank you for coming today.
Thank you for inviting me, Roxy. I'm really happy to speak with you.
Yes, me too. And I was thinking, right now we're in psychedelic renaissance, basically, where there's so much information, there's so many things happening. And I wanted to pinpoint things down to what you've seen, being a retreat leader, basically, being in this space. You also have a lot of experience just with yourself in psychedelics, but from this approach of in your own life, also seeing the way people are in this space, your clients, you have this breadth of experience that a lot of people probably don't have. Like, I've tripped with many friends, but I haven't tripped with thousands of people, many of them who are strangers to you. And so I think the way we can navigate this conversation is through changes that happen through psychedelics. And there's 4 energy bodies that I think we can dissect it through and talk about. And so the first one would be the physical. So this would be our biology or physiology, and the ways in which the body can heal. The second would be the emotional, which is the nervous system, our feelings, our state of being in the world. And then the third is mental. So beliefs, intellect, attitudes and ideas about the world. And then the last is the spiritual, which we can say is this connection to divinity, to something larger than ourselves. And there's this notion in working with the 4 energy bodies that before you get to the spiritual, the 3 other bodies kind of have to be harnessed and refined. And then that container is what allows the spiritual to come in. But with psychedelics, it's quite different, because it's like you can reach that space not having to meditate 10 hours a day. You can reach that space without doing yoga for 3 years before. And so what are the changes that you've seen in yourself and through people? Maybe we can start with the first body, which would be the physical.
Yeah, thank you for this intro. It's interesting. Today I was writing a metaphor for exactly this topic for my podcast, that you get born really fast with psychedelics. So there's like the usual birth of a human takes some hours usually, like the labor. It's called labor actually, right? It takes some effort, but also sometimes the birth gets through. I don't know the English word when you
C-section, when you're taken out,
right?
Yeah.
And I feel like psychedelics sometimes are the C-section of whatever, of spiritual growth or personal growth, emotional growth. They're really fast. They just throw you out there and then you're there, but you didn't do the work for that. You just came to life for this few hours at least. But a normal birth takes labor, but also it's really important for the psychology. Like the woman gets a lot of oxytocin, and it's just a natural process that is necessary for the child to develop perfectly, emotionally and intellectually. At least that's what the science is saying. And with psychedelics, I feel it's kind of similar, that when people experience God or experience like all their emotions or new insights or like health or whatever, and then they come back to their normal life, it's sometimes really hard to then naturally go to this point again, or become this version of themselves again that they saw there and that they really liked because it really felt right. That's just as an anecdote. So it's the first point, what you said, the body, right? The changes in their body.
Physically.
And the physically. So I think it's all about health. What I've seen, health changes. People change their health for the better. And so the question is, why is the health not good before? Why don't we have good bodily health at all? And I think there are two ways of looking at it. We can say the world is making us unhealthy by like McDonald's or I don't know, these fast food and just the food choices that we get nowadays, especially the easily accessible ones. They are rather unhealthy. And I mean, we all know that shit. Everybody knows that this is unhealthy, but we still do it, which leads me to the second part of why we're unhealthy, which is our psyche, which is that we eventually in our life either copying it from our parents, or it's just a distraction from difficult emotions. We start to eat unhealthy. We consume sugar. Sugar is actually really interesting. I just read about this, that it's such an interesting drug because once it gives you dopamine, you feel like, oh yeah, this is good. I'm doing something right. But on the other hand, it also fills your stomach and it also calms you down. You calms your nervous system by eating. So you get dopamine, which is short active, and then you get the long-lasting effect of, yeah, this was really good. So these are basically like the reasons I think why we're living unhealthy, and which of course also has an effect on our body. And I mean, you could talk a lot more than about like we do not enough sports or anything and these kind of things. And I think with psychedelics, we look past all these habits that make us unhealthy, being it like our beliefs, and also about you just see that I want to be healthy. This body is all I get. I don't get a second body. I don't get a second chance. So people see that health is just so important to them. So when they come back from their psychedelic journey, maybe this influences their new life decisions every day. Like maybe they get a new window of tolerance where they can decide for not eating the unhealthy food, but more eating the healthy food, to go to the gym or not go to the gym. It's interesting because this is like really a theme in psychedelic changes, that people care more about their health. And I believe it's because psychedelics take away what makes us unhealthy, and then we notice that we live an unhealthy life. And so the only thing we can do after is to live healthy, to make the more healthy decisions.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you're saying, because it seems like you can't bring up the body or our physicality without also bringing up the mind. Like everything you just touched upon is true. Actually a synergy of many of the different bodies, energetic bodies meeting. And from what I've seen in myself, and also, I also worked at a psychedelic retreat as well around education. And from what I saw with people in these spaces is it sensitizes you so much to what actually matters in life. And everyone, I can say everyone who's gone through like a huge crisis in their life, I feel each person always comes back to the thing of like, actually what matters most is my health. Every single time. It's like a reoccurring theme of like
survival mechanism almost, because without health we die. So it's like, wait.
Yeah. And that actually goes into, so another component of the physical is our capacity to heal, which is definitely related to the emotional body and the mental body. So it's like these three bodies are all in constant communication. And the way you treat one of them is actually the way in which the others will respond. Yeah. And so and I feel like something else about psychedelics is there's a huge focus on healing. I would say the primary reason that many people even want to go into psychedelics in general is around this notion of healing. So in your retreat, with what you've seen with people, would you say this is also the primary pull? And do you think healing is something that can happen through doing psychedelics or because there's so much information happening, like for example, doing something like Bufo or DMT, it's like in 15 minutes, you're getting so much information. It's really difficult to integrate that into the foundation of your everyday waking life. And so then it's like you have the experience and then you just go back into your way of living. But how would you define healing? And how do you see it play out in psychedelics?
I didn't start psychedelics because of healing. I think I started it, first of all, I was just curious. And then I learned, oh, you can find out things about yourself. You see yourself from a different perspective. So more rationally, I thought, oh, see myself from a third view and find out more about myself, which led to healing. And I would say the term healing is, it's kind of like drugs. It has associations with it. Like everyone thinks something different. Same with love, for example. And healing, what is healing? I mean, you have the medical healing, which means, you just get back to health. And then you have emotional healing, for example, which is integrating your emotions that have been suppressed or repressed and integrating them. And there are all different, people see it as, have different views on it. But I think what people are looking for always when they come to psychedelics, even though they don't know it, or let's say what they get usually, what heals them is what I just said, emotional healing. Emotions are really the foundation of our life, right? A foundation of our what we're doing, how we're thinking, what we're believing. Everything is stored, or not stored, but controlled by emotions. And so it's obvious that if something goes wrong, that something is wrong with the emotions. Something is missing, because why would our system make us unhealthy just out of fun? It's because something is wrong with the emotional system. And I believe that what many people experience on our retreats, for example, is emotions that they haven't felt before, that were not accessible, that they didn't know about, that they're there, that they maybe didn't want to, but they needed to. And that's I believe this is the healing I think is what psychedelics are bringing to this world, or can help us with. And this is all we need to feel better. Like, if I really speak now, like in a very absolute term, like emotional healing is healing. This is the healing that we need and that psychedelics bring us.
Yeah, I also think because with emotions, when it becomes repetitive, it's almost like a feedback system to the body, mind complex, and we get used to a certain default setting of living. So I've met people who have done Vipassana 20 times
Wow.
who are still so miserable. I've met people who have done a lot of different healing modalities or spiritual modalities for the process of healing, but in a way they haven't actually felt the pain that they've needed to actually feel in order to kind of release it in a way, or at least come to terms with it, or at least give it room so that they can move on to something else. And I think there's many ways in which the ego really becomes it's like a perverse pleasure where I speak for myself as well, actually, because I've been in this, where we become it's almost like you enjoy your own suffering. and I think this is part of the human psyche when we're blind to our true natures. And I think psychedelics have this, there's a saying all the time, like, you're seeing through the veil. You're seeing through all the egoic projections, all of the things that actually really aren't the self. And that decluttering, to me at least, has been healing. Where it's not really about finding the self, it's about actually, like, these are all the things I'm not. And
discovering it, revealing it.
Yeah, it's almost like a remembering of something really foundational, like the roots. And in a way, so many of us are just disconnected from that foundation of what we really are and who we really are. And so I feel like psychedelics are just this massive, like, let's take away all of the clothes, like, and the naked life, like, let's get naked and let's, like, feel the wind upon our skin. Let's see what we're actually made of, what this life is really for. And most of the time it's extremely simple. It's almost like ridiculous how simple things are.
Especially on psychedelics, I always have this experience. Often I took LSD and went to the woods or something, and I was just standing there for 20 minutes looking nowhere, and this came this thought, why more? This is all I need. This the hippie thought. It's like just air and just like being here outside, and I don't need a phone or something. I just want to be. I don't need much to be happy, and in these states of consciousness, it's true. But of course, and I don't think it's really true. It's just.
Sorry, what do you mean by that?
I have to say that, right? I have to say that to justify my life as it is.
Yeah, it's interesting the reconfigurements that happen after taking psychedelics and how you want to adjust your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's almost like, in a way, the aperture or the lens widens where you can see things. Where you can see things more clearly.
More light comes in.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like, oh, okay, I don't want to live in the dark anymore. And how was I living in the dark? But so many of the ways in which we are living in the dark are like necessities. There are hundreds of times where I'm like, I'm just going to delete my social media.
Yeah.
And like, I've been through this, especially on acid, so many times where I'm like, this is the stupidest construct that is taking away more energy actually than it's giving.
I just signed up on social media actually.
Uh-huh.
I didn't have an account, so now I have one. So
How has it been being on it now?
I didn't post anything yet.
Okay, so you're not in the void of...
Not yet. But I was actually at the same point with social media, and then I deleted it, and now I signed up again. Do you know about existential kink?
The book Existential Kink.
I guess there's a book, but that's exactly what you were describing before, that you somehow perversely like the feeling of suffering.
Yeah.
But it goes two ways. It's either in a harmful way, that you stay in your harmful cycles and you just suffer and suffer and suffer. But it's also a good view or perspective or quality that you like negative emotions or unpleasant emotions. This can also be an existential kink. I think that it's really important to have this for psychedelics, because you're going to feel a lot of unpleasant emotions.
Yeah, that's true. And that's also going into the notion, for me at least, I don't see anything ever as a bad trip. I've had certain trips where literally I feel like I didn't stop crying, or I undulate between like laughing manically and crying and feeling so much pain, and then bringing it back to the physical body. Sometimes I have this feeling of my heart being like ripped open, and I don't label it as a bad trip, because there was something that I feel it did to me that I wasn't accessing in my conscious life, and that was probably, if it happened, necessary. So yeah.
So it ended. The trip, the bad trip had an end, right? And so you could learn something out of it. So I think when it doesn't end, when it continues in your sober life, I think that's when it can become a bad trip, until you make it end and you integrate it. But I'm with you that bad trips are, like, in my perspective, I say bad trips are not integrated trips in some sense. But of course, just I think many of these are triggered by people who shouldn't have done psychedelics, or not who haven't been prepared enough, like the trips that don't end. That's how I feel.
In your mind, besides, like, I feel like many people know that schizophrenics, for instance, shouldn't do psychedelics or things like this.
Yeah.
What would you say would be a lack of preparation?
I think I can tell you how we do it in our retreats. How we do the screening. So you asked before about the healing as well, about our participants actually. And I don't believe that so many come for us like purposefully for, I want to heal, I'm suffering so much. So that their motivation is a lot of getting away from deep suffering they feel for many years. I'd say our participants are rather healthy people, rather quote unquote normal people, because that's what we feel most comfortable with. Because I feel like when people are really suffering for many years by deep depression, what they really need is a therapy, combined with psychedelics, of course, can help. But our retreat is more focusing on looking inside, looking what's more in the life of our participants. What can they find in themselves? They come with questions, maybe spiritual questions, maybe emotional questions, or maybe, of course, they suffer, but they don't have such they don't feel such a huge pressure from suffering. That's how I see it, at least.
But going back to the question in lack of preparation, do you feel like anyone can do psychedelics if they're mentally sound, or would you say there are certain ways in which it could be detrimental?
So what we do in our retreats, in our processes, we give them, first of all, we look for their intentions and their motivations. That's what we do really in the beginning. Why you want to do it? So what's your really, do you have a good enough reason to just use probably the most intense tool for your psyche that there is? So you must have a good reason for this risk. It is always a risk. So the most risk-free experience you will have if you don't take it, of course. And after that, we have a psychological test. It goes like 20 minutes, and they fill out basically everything, how they feel in everyday life if they use this or that medication. It has been created by a psychologist. I'm not so deep into this test. But after this test, they additionally speak with a clinical psychologist for 30 minutes, at least 30 minutes. And then this psychologist, in some cases, speaks to a doctor, one of our doctors, and they decide if this person is really ready for psychedelics, for this trip at this moment. So we take it really serious, because I believe that I feel a little bit of responsibility for psychedelics, that we don't do bullshit with them, because if we fuck up, the whole scene fucks up a little bit more, because the view that, for example, media or whatsoever what they have on psychedelics. And it's interesting because the last months I really tried to find out, why am I doing this? Why this is like not first of all, it's not a really safe job for me. Then it's not really safe for the participants. We try our best, but of course it's still a risky thing to do, taking psychedelics. And then thirdly, you cannot really get rich with it. There's not that much money in the psychedelic space until it goes to the medical sector, of course. Then there's a lot of money. So I was wondering, why am I doing this? And then I noticed these substances, they changed my life for the better, like really for the better. And I feel so much like I owe them. Like this, and it's really the substances. Like if I think, I have this picture of a LSD blotter in my head, or a mushroom. I think like, what? And I have this picture of a LSD blotter in my head, and I see it, and I'm like, well, a mushroom, and I feel gratitude and like not guilt, but I need to help them. They need to be helped because they're only substances, and people are doing bullshit with them. And people think bullshit about them. So somebody, or many people, should try to help them, to bring them into society, to let them fill out their potential they have. And if you ask me directly, who shouldn't take psychedelics? So I think there are many contraindications for that. And with every contraindication, you can find a way to use it with almost every, because I think it's wrong to just be 100% system confirm and say, for example, schizophrenia, if you have schizophrenia, you shouldn't take it. Yes, you shouldn't take it, especially on my retreat. I don't want to take responsibility, but if you find someone who takes responsibility for that, I'm not here to judge what you do. You can do with your body what you want. That's my belief. That's why I think the psychedelic law is wrong. But of course, if we want to spread psychedelics more, we need to implement them in the system, and we need to find safe containers and so on. So I say, like, on an ultimate level, I wouldn't say that anyone shouldn't take them. But on a more safe level, and especially if I take responsibility, which I'm doing a lot, I say, for example, people with schizophrenia, with treatment-resistant depression, and with psychosis in their family, especially. Like, for example, people with psychosis in their family, we don't allow them on our retreats. Like, these people should be really, really careful with that. And sometimes I feel like that especially these people with their suffering have more reason to heal, have more reason to take psychedelics, even, you could say. So it's really kind of I'm standing
It's
in the middle.
counterintuitive. Yeah.
It's like also I say that, for example, we don't allow people on our retreats who have like really deep depression, and on the other hand, I feel like they would need it though the most. They would need to go into a therapy and a psychedelic session the most. So I think that, or I hope that the medical system will finally come to its legalization of psychedelic therapy, and also that the people who need it on a very deep level can find healing there.
Yeah. Also, it seems like just in life, we get the greatest rewards when there is risk involved in what we're doing.
True, yeah.
And I like this saying of like the tender edge, how when you meet your edge in life is where there's growth. It's not like staying in like the shallow waters. It's kind of swimming to the deep end and seeing that actually it gives you the confidence when you know you can float. And
let go, jump.
Yeah. And then there's this other saying, I'm like, jump and the net will appear. Like,
cool.
Like how
like
life
this.
has a way of,
You're not gonna die.
hopefully. How life has a way of holding you, and I feel like the holding happens the more that you brought up this word intention, but the more the why is purified and understood for yourself. It doesn't have to be for your family or for other people, but the more clear it is inside.
With all your shadows.
Yeah, so which it's also confusing to talk about because it's the shadow for a reason. You're not fully seeing it. It's like it's there, but it's like vague and not fully formed. And yeah, to be able to hold that. And so
I think this is really important what you're saying, that because I think this is one of the biggest dangers, that it's not that your intentions are not purified, it is that you believe they are. This is what I see a lot, that people neglecting their shadows and thinking they use psychedelics or they give other people psychedelics because of their pure heart, but they're not. They also have like an egoic mind. We all have. It's important in some sense. And so they believe that they can heal the world, that they will end suffering, and they will be the one who do it, of course. So yeah, I like this purifying of intention in that sense.
Yeah, purifying of intention, but then it's interesting also how you bring up the ways in which maybe we hide from ourselves, and it's difficult talking about even concepts of the shadow, or even if you go into the way Jung talks about it, because it's the shadow for a reason. Like we are so blind to it because it's happening on such a subconscious level that the mind hasn't grasped it fully. So even when like many people are into this whole shadow work, and it's like it's not something you can go directly at. It's kind of like a very nebulous space. And so it makes sense that most of the time we can think actually what we're doing is really pure, but maybe it's not. And that's why when we were going back in this conversation to the emotional body, to the way it actually feels, versus all the constructs that we can build around it. And this to me in life is why actually rationality is dangerous, is the fact that when you have a really strong intellect, your mind can maneuver and can rationalize almost anything, and it's
not only almost,
like pretty much everything, and it's really terrifying.
I had this a lot, and I still have it when I'm really triggered. I notice, and I think one of the biggest changes for me was to see my narcissism and to see this shadow, because this is for me like this rationality is like narcissism for me. It's like you have something so vulnerable in you, so you need to defend it with your mind as strongly as you can. There's no way you go there. There's no way you feel this emotion. And so that's why I'm saying that many people, and I was and I'm still like this, of course, in different senses, that they believe they have no shadow, and that's why they have one, and that's why it wreaks havoc on themselves and all the loved ones they have in their lives. So I believe the way of healing for these people, me included, is to allow to allow more that they're wrong. That's what helped me a lot. It's to hold still and like, I could be wrong. And I mostly are.
Yeah, and there's a real humility to that, and like a humbling.
Yeah.
And that's also why I think these spaces like psychedelics or vipassana or whatever way that we can communicate with something grander than ourselves is so important, is the fact that it humbles us, and that we're not these points, we're not these people that we think actually know everything. To know that you don't know is the start of grace in some way.
True.
And it actually ends up being a nice feeling, because then you realize how much you're not fully steering the car of your life, and there's something more intelligent than you working its way, and you don't need to analyze it or comprehend it. And that's where we've covered the physical, emotional, a little bit of the mental, but to me that's why the spiritual body of life is so important and beautiful, is this feeling like there's something so much larger than me at play, but I'm a part of it. And it's that feeling of like relaxing into life, where it's like, I don't need to, harness and control and govern everything. Like, it's all happening, and I'm just like this small part of like the infinite web that we're all a part of. So
this is a nice way of seeing life, and I think I can resonate a lot what you're saying, because this is also what psychedelic showed me, this feeling of not being the center of the universe, that there's something bigger than me. Actually, it came back like the last couple of months. I rediscovered this a lot more, because it's interesting. When I took Bufo, for example, I really was in this thinking, but over time it subsided again a little bit, and now I rediscovered it. I always think like the spiritual body and the mental body, they cannot really work together too well, I believe. Like, they are not the best friends, at least in my life a little bit. But I can really feel what you were saying, because I was so rational, and I still am. But it's nice to actually, this tattoo of mine is exactly this. I can describe it. This is a meditating person. He's meditating there, and he's like spiritually enlightened, or I don't know. It's just like the spiritual kind of thing I wanted to express.
The figure is in like full lotus position, basically.
Exactly. But eventually he starts with zeros and ones. You can see that he is made out of zeros and ones, out of logic, and then this logic eventually goes like a nebula. It's dissolving him into everything. Like the zeros and ones are dissolving. So what I wanted to do with that is basically express both sides of the spectrum, the not describable, you cannot describe it, to the logical part that's describing everything in logic, 0 or 1. And we had this conversation before, right? What Misha said, that I believe eventually we will be able to describe anything. I would say we humans won't. Something will, whatever that is. But I believe that as long as we're human, as long as we think of ourselves of humans, we should stop to describe everything logically. And this is what I wanted to express with this tattoo.
Yeah, and just looking at the tattoo, it's like the disintegration. Like, you see it's like disappearing basically at the top. Yeah, it's
dissolving into everything, kind of.
Yeah, and that's why I don't think that we're going to be able to explain everything in life. And that's actually the beauty of words, is the fact that it's like trying to reach something which is so vast and so large. And words are just trying to, take our experience and make sense of them. But it's always a reduction. Yeah.
Reduction veil is the one, right? Who was saying that always?
Can you repeat the line? What is it?
The reductionist veil or something.
Reductionist veil. I don't know who it is.
I think it was Aldous Huxley.
Aldous Huxley, yeah. It sounds like something he would say. Yeah. It's also an interesting point you bring up with the mental body seemingly being in conflict with the spiritual body. But even when you think about a lot of spirituality, it's set on beliefs, and the beliefs are are felt through lived experience, which then actually makes the beliefs even stronger. And beliefs are basically always working as this kind of like placebo pill of life becoming whatever you think it to be.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the saying, like, whatever you think, either way, you're right. Like, whatever you really, really think, like, you're just going to end up being right.
Yeah.
And so it's better to have these beliefs that are more empowering in a way than disempowering. And I think spirit plays a big part of that in belief system in a way. Like, on a grander scale, it's no belief. There just is. Yeah, it's the non-dualism, whatever you want to call it. But even that is a belief. Like, we are all one. It's like,
because you used the word.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
used the words already.
Yeah. Something I also wanted to touch on is what I see that we're in. Even we talked about social media and how you're like very late in on the social media game, which is so cool. Yeah, not even a first post yet. But this thing that I see on social media almost all the time, and maybe it's my algorithm, but I feel like we're in this phase of life that so much is about self-development. Like, so much is about developing the self, about becoming great, about achieving, about being hot so I can show how hot I am, about all these, even seeing like life coaches all the time. I'm like, whoa, this is so crazy, seeing like 25, 30-year-olds coaching people on life. I'm like, wow, this is so strange, this world we're living in. But it's for a reason, in the fact that there is something that, yeah, we feel needs to be developed within ourselves. And to me, what's more interesting than self-development is self-transcendence. And this is also where I think psychedelics play a huge role of going out of the boundaries of what we think ourselves to be. And so I'm just interested to hear what you've seen in psychedelics, in self-development, how you see it actually helping people be more productive, efficient in the world, better lovers, maybe better just humans, and then how you see it in self-transcendence and going beyond what we see ourselves as.
I noticed when you ask me this, the second thing, I feel like, what does it even mean?
Self-transcendence,
Yeah.
Which one? Self-transcendence.
But okay, I'll start. I try.
Maybe you should define it first. What do you see self-transcendence as?
For me, this is the spiritual thing we were talking about before. This is the know without your ego, basically, the room you go when your ego stays behind. The it just is, like, in its ultimate form. This is when yourself really transcended into somewhere.
I think, and also when we say ego, to me the ego is the personality construct, the persona. It's like all your opinions, my preferences, what I like, what I don't like, all these like kind of frivolous things. And then to me the self-transcendence is I guess more spiritual, in terms of self-transcendence being more about soul material rather than personality construct. And it has like a really different flavor and texture to it.
So would you say that a person who is self-transcended can still be in life and function? Or so, because in my mind, self-transcendent means you have no self, so you're like, you cannot do anything in life. You're not, you're nothing. But you mean that the egoic mind is more transcended, so you come to your true, authentic self. Is this more what you mean?
Yeah, to me, self-transcendence would mean like there's a smaller self and the larger self, and the smaller self would be the egoic.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Okay, let's see. So, personal development. Yeah, I think this word has also so many associations, right? Also with life coaches or business coaches, the worst. And that it's all about getting more or something, right? Getting better at something. Whereas psychedelics don't necessarily give you more, but more you, but more real, but more what's already there. So maybe not more, but less of the bullshit. And I see many people who do personal development in a sense of, like more materialistic goals, But I think there's also personal development in a spiritual sense. And in my mind, if we just take the word, personal development, the words, it's just developing your person, you as a person. And this could also be part of the self-transcendence, I believe, like, because a personal development is maybe different than a self-transcendence. Maybe these are different concepts. And what I used in the past in my podcast, I said it's emotional self-development. I try to frame it a little bit different, that people know this is not about becoming better, because they have so many associations with that. I think everybody starts on this journey with the first one. I need to get better in some things. I need to be more productive. But eventually you see this is not making you happy on a deep level. So I believe a healthy personal development will be to look in your emotions, like emotional healing or emotional personal development. And the self-transcendence, I think the theory that I have behind this is there like a right, you say like a, is there like what's the most human thing we can be? What's the most real, true thing we can be? And there we have, of course, these concepts that our authentic self, or our real self, or self-transcendent self is really in love and empathetic and you're a good human then. But I had this, looked at this study. It was really interesting. They used MDMA. And there was this one, it was an article where they spoke about how they discovered that many Nazi groups used MDMA and psychedelics.
Oh, wow. I thought they were using meth the whole time.
No.
Okay.
They're also using these kind of substances. And I was like, well, shouldn't they be self-transcended eventually? If they
I don't think just because you use those things that you will be self-transcendent. I think also many things happen in like this faint glimmer of an eye. So you have it and then you don't, which is actually also the nature of life, is like this impermanence. Like, I am this way right now and then you lose it and then you have it again. And so I feel like there's like a finality almost when we think like self-transcendence, like I've transcended myself forever, and maybe that doesn't exist.
No, I don't think so. And I think we're human, and what you were saying before, our subconscious is so huge, we're so complex. There's no way in hell that our brain just makes itself in an order that's perfect. It's just, and it will stay perfect forever. This is what I don't like about enlightenment, about these kind of concepts. People are looking for this ultimate set of neural connection. Like, they want to change their brain to a state where nothing can happen anymore. Now they're enlightened. They cannot fall asleep anymore. And people are always looking for the ultimate. And that's maybe what they look for with psychedelics, and also with self-transcendence as well. They're looking for, I am transcended. I am enlightened. I don't have to anymore. I'm done with this shit. So I'm really, how you say, I don't know the English word. I'm
skeptical.
Skeptical. Thank you. You know me. You see the word in my eyes.
Yeah. Another thing I feel is that the self-development, in a way, actually can be a vessel into self-transcendence. Is in the beginning we're developing ourselves because there's this yearning for something to be better, and then we realize that the best thing we can be, in a way, is just less and more of the fundamental. And so I think it feeds into each other.
Maybe we notice that what you were saying, we just want to get better. Maybe we notice the reason why we want to get better is to be happier, and then we notice, wait, is getting better the best way to be happier? And then we notice, oh, there's a different path to that. Actually, the first path is like a bottomless hole. We will always fall through it forever. And so maybe then they gravitate more towards self-transcendence. That's at least how it was for me as well, or for many people I know with psychedelics. Like, usually your intentions change after you've taken psychedelics a couple of times.
Yeah. And spinning it back to, intention and why we do things. And we talked about this whole notion of wanting to heal and healing is I feel like both of us started our psychedelic journeys in a really similar way. And mine was, in the beginning, it had nothing to do about healing at all. And I actually think that even still, this is perfectly fine. I feel like a lot of the time we have morality and a hierarchy of goodness. And to me, doing psychedelics recreationally, it's like what you want to experience. There's the depth of doing something in a container with a group of people with really strong intention and being led, and that's like a beautiful experience. And then there's being in nature completely alone, having your own stuff come up, and that's also its own experience. And then there's being at a party, getting into trance state through psychedelics and music and sexuality and dancing and joy. And I think there's something so beautiful about real joy, like really loving life, being crazy, dancing like an animal, being naked with your friends on the beach, like this process of thoroughly celebrating life. And I feel like in this hierarchy, we're always seeing this like keen focus on healing. Healing is the best thing we can do for the collective, which in some way is true, but also I love the idea of joy as resistance. And sometimes it almost feels like there's this cognitive split. I mean, even being on this island, a lot of my best friends are Russians, and we'll be in these really beautiful spaces together. And there's that reality of what's going on at home, which is the war, which is the fact that so many of them have had to leave because of mobilization and not believing in the war because of the way everything is going back home. This feeling of such despair. And that acute awareness of the horrors of reality. And in the very same moment, being on an island in nature with people you love. And I feel like so much of life is being able to handle the paradox, the fact that both can actually exist and one isn't worse than the other. Just because there is suffering, it doesn't actually do a service to suffer as well. Because I feel like there's a lot of this... We know there's so much heaviness in life, and rather than just always going into the heaviness, there's such a beauty in celebrating like the other side, which is always like, as someone's dying, a baby's being born. As there's war, there's like familial love. And being able to handle this paradox is what makes life so interesting and precious.
And then you don't have any hierarchy anymore if you see it this way. And it's interesting because you were talking about this hierarchy of different modalities or different use cases of psychedelics, and people have, they say this is maybe more important or better than the other. The thing is, on psychedelics, they don't think this way. They always think of psychedelics, of a hierarchy with psychedelics. And that's, isn't it funny? Because always when people tell me that, I'm like, is this what psychedelics are about? That we now fight what's the better way of using them? Is this what they taught you? I'm not sure. And then about healing, I always think there's a good way of healing or a healthy way of healing and maybe not an unhealthy way of healing. And to my healing, at least, taking LSD on a festival was important. Because if I wouldn't allow me that, if I wouldn't allow me what you said, the trance and the joy and just experience life to its really full extent, maxed out, then maybe I would be a little less happy, or I would be a little less, even more neurotically focused on I need to heal, emotions. But I still fall sometimes into this pit that we had a trip a while ago, and it was interesting because we were different people. Like every one of us, we didn't trip before together in this context. And every one of us had different experience with psychedelics and different ways of using them. And then we were 5. And 3 of us, during the experience, were like, I want to heal. Let's do healing. Let's talk about emotions. And let's go deep into pain. Like we had this energy. And the other 2, they had more of this energy. Let's not heal. I know there is something there that wants to be healed, but no, I want to eat chips. Or I want to drink a Coke. Or I want to go in the water, or I want to do something. And it was interesting because you could feel that there was a separation between us of different intentions, of different, and that didn't feel so nice. But the funny thing is, eventually, we all healed. We all had our healing journey during this trip. So I think if we let psychedelics do their thing, we're gonna heal. If we ask psychedelics to heal and to do this and that for us, it's not gonna be a healthy way of healing.
Yeah, there's similar themes that come up for me. And it's, when I think about this whole aspect of what you brought up of quieting the mind, so much of that is actually the way it looks in my life of moving more slowly, of taking these various avenues in which the complexity of thoughts isn't fully necessary. Which allows us to actually access the moment more. And it's really strange because I feel like there's this part of me, like how there's this concept of witness consciousness. There is this witness that's always just like very neutrally seeing what's happening. But then I have this other part of me that's like a strange narrator that's like commenting on this, opinion on that, like intellectualizing, analyzing, dissecting this person. Someone comes up to me, there's like 6 thoughts about them. And when I can get this narrator to just quiet down, then the witness just has more spaciousness. And then there's more of actually just seeing what's in front of you rather than like clouding it with thoughts. And for me, that's the way I've witnessed a lot of psychedelics is this, and same with actually many different modalities, is this slowness. Like everything somehow becomes, like it doesn't need to be commented on. Like that feeling of just isness. And the question is if we can train that and come back to it consistently. And that's also for me the process of integration of there's certain lessons that we've felt it's actually been embodied, maybe just for 30 minutes, but we've been there. And then the integration is like coming back to that place, like almost training ourselves when we fall off to hop back on and to notice and gently nudge ourselves in the direction of what we feel is true in life and is benevolent and good.
I like what you say, that you essentially said, at least how I understood, that you form your life in a way that makes space for less thoughts, makes space to quiet down the mind. For example, if you say I meditate every day, because that's, I feel, what it's coming down to. Can you create a life where you where you find time and space for looking inside, and that's the hardest part, though. That's the hardest part about integration. I notice this all the time. For example, I start meditating again, and then I stop and I don't do it anymore, and then I become really more rigid, and the witness consciousness becomes less again, and I'm more in my head. It's such a up and down, but I feel like that's always how it's gonna be.
Yeah, there's always fluctuations. And sometimes there's actually like, I have periods where I completely don't want to meditate, but I'll have certain things I do in a very meditative state. Like eating, for example, I'll be like, I'm eating alone today, and I'll have days of just eating alone, eating really slowly, like no stimulation. And
I know that.
just besides the food, and this is like a form of meditation. Or living in nature, I feel like I make a point every day to go to the water, whether it's a waterfall or the ocean, or just being near water helps to just soothe the ecosystem of my mind. And like, kind of
ego or eco?
Eco, both. ecosystem, both. This biosphere of all these things happening, just kind of, it's like pacified near water. So it's noticing the avenues that bring me to this state of just more neutrality.
Yeah, that's good. I like it.
Yeah. And so I think this is an interesting way to end off we've talked a lot about ourselves and what we've even seen in people, but how do you see psychedelics being implemented in just greater society? So what we're seeing right now is like, for instance, the psychedelic retreat company that I previously worked for is really, really based around CEOs and very high functioning people.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the time we see the opposite, where it's really about people who just need to heal. And then we see it with how you're saying, just the normal people yearning for more. So there's these various demographics, but how do you see it like implemented in the future of society?
There are different paths we could go. I think the most logical thing I can think of is that we go through the medical system, like with everything else. Like cannabis was also first medically legalized before it was legalized almost everywhere. So I think this is what happens next. MDMA will be legalized this year, maybe next year in the US for PTBS.
Do you think the legalization of it actually usually changes the substance though? Like it's altered in some way? Or even the set and setting, for example, if I'm doing LSD therapy, for instance, and I'm doing it in a white clinical room versus doing it, by the ocean, don't you think those will be huge differences?
Yeah,
do you think the best way?
There's no best way, right? So there are studies about naturalistic settings as well, and they show really many advantages of doing naturalistic settings, but also disadvantages. So there's a setting and set for everything, I believe. But if I just think of the rational future that we're going to have with psychedelics, how they will be implemented, I believe first medical, and then what we really need is a change in societal perception of psychedelics. This is what's with cannabis as well. In Germany, for example, there's now a legalization happening. The only way this could happen was that the society, like the general opinion of cannabis, changed, and people were more open to it, even though it was medically allowed. So it was still, it took some time until society got used to it, until everybody knew someone who smokes cannabis and who's still like a normal person. And I think this is what next then with psychedelics after medical integration. And then eventually I hope that we're going to have like spiritual centers, like retreat centers where people can have their psychedelic experience. And maybe this goes hand in hand with decrim, like decriminalization that's happening in the US now a lot. Like all these things are going to happen. I don't know about how many people will or should or can use psychedelics in the end, because I think you need to be a special kind of person to do that. First of all, you need to be open towards your mind and towards your emotions in some sense, and also to be open to do something so strong, so intense. So I think if we talk about integration of psychedelics, we should maybe also talk about integration of mindfulness, about emotions, about emotional healing, about the psyche, about yoga, whatever, like all these kind of crazy things we do in Kopangan, about how mainstream can they get. And I believe that with the rise of AI actually, and like universal basic income and all these kinds of things, eventually we'll come to a point where most people will finally have enough time that they are forced to look inside. And I think when that happens, then that could be a breakthrough, but not in a sense of it happens all at once, but gradually. Like a spiritualized society. It sounds kind of, I try to be rational, and I don't know if humanity can make it this far as a whole, but let's hope. Let's see.
Yeah. The point you brought up that I don't know if I agree with is about AI actually, and it giving us more spaciousness to go inward. I feel like there was a similar notion with the computer, like look how much data this can crunch, look how much it can do, and then we're just hunched over computers 12 hours a day. And so
yeah, that's true.
I feel like there always be ways in which we cannot attend to the inner world, and in some way it will have to be actually a choice to go inside and to see the interior and what it's about. And even when we say these words of spirituality, how there's so many different types, and for us there's a type, and then obviously for someone who's a Muslim there's a very specific type. And so I think the future of psychedelics is actually going to be way more accessible probably than ever if we think about in 10-20 years. And then the question will be who chooses to hop on board and how. And it will be interesting either way.
It will be really interesting. And I always try to find a balance between what I want and what will actually happen, because it's always slower and always different, these whole processes, I believe. And I see with AI in that sense that there will be a point in time, which is not too far in the future, where AI will be smarter than us. And what happens then, nobody knows. And let's just assume it will be good for humans. Then most likely it will do things that will make us more happier, which is do all the shit work that nobody wants to do. And then we get eventually make us not need to work anymore. Maybe this sounds like a fairy tale, but in what I've seen, and I'm an IT guy, I come from IT, what I've seen, this might very likely be the future. And then I believe we have more time. But of course we will find distractions, even if we don't, like people who don't work still are not like confronting their trauma or something. So it will take a lot of time until MAPS, the multidisciplinary, they said they want to do zero net trauma until 2070. That's their prediction. I'm not 100% sure how they mean it, but I think it's about that we create more trauma in our society than we heal. I'm not sure if they exactly mean that, but like a break-even point where we say, okay, now it's going the other way. Now we really heal the society. So I have hope in that way, that AI also can help us there. But I'm an IT guy, you're not, so maybe we have different opinions. I can just think about the way in which what we perceive ourselves, how to be happy. And I was even thinking about the ways in which we've replaced people with machines already, which makes sense to me. Like if work is very mindless and actually a human mind doesn't need to be a fundamental part of it, then maybe it doesn't need to be there. But for instance, like self-checkout at grocery stores, where you're just checking out your own vegetables and all of this, versus going to someone. Like I feel so good going to a mama on like the side of the road to pick up my vegetables and like speaking to her and her giving me 5 extra lychees or a papaya because she likes me, in this brief encounters with strangers. I actually enjoy it. I enjoy it. And to me, it's a way of connecting. And so if our work is just machines doing everything, where do we deem our value? Because actually the beautiful part of work is, I think Bell Hooks said this, she's a really great writer, and she said work is love made visible. Like the highest pinnacle of work is love made visible, and that means it's tied to our sense of purpose. And if everything can be outsourced to AI, then the question is, what is our sense of purpose in life, and where does that lead us to? And the notion that not all progress is beneficial progress. Yeah. And so there's always this notion of reaching for something higher or more. And like the question is, what do we actually really need in life? What do we really feel we need to sustain ourselves? More money.
Shmoney. Give me money.
More success. More attention. More likes.
Yeah.
More dopamine. That's what we need.
Okay, it's getting nihilistic now. Yeah. but yeah.
But I like your view on that with the cashier or the mama.
Yeah, I like a mama giving me fruit. Yeah.
But if you go to like a big city, There's no mama behind the behind the machine. There's like just a person who does his or her job, and they're like, come on, let's get it over with. And I think it's not about getting like erasing work. It's more about erasing useless work that doesn't feel good. If mama likes it, why should she stop working? I don't think that that here they will build like a super center or something here on this island. And you know, this is how it is already now. I think this is happening already in the big cities. Like you said, the automated cashier systems, they're already there in place. But maybe here on Copenhagen, it will not happen because people don't want it. There will always be the smaller communities that want to live more naturalistic, want to stay closer to nature. And so you have some people live in the city and some in villages. And actually now in Germany, I heard that there is a trend of people moving out of cities again. They grew and grew and grew, and now the villages grow again because people feel like, I don't need this city life anymore. I need not this little unnatural life. I want to go back to my roots, to my human roots. So I believe there's hope.
Yeah, I think there will be a divergence with AI for sure, which will, maybe split humanity even more in questioning the ways in which we want to live and what system we actually want to be a part of.
Yeah, because we have more freedom to do that then actually, I believe. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this conversation and for your insights and for, being brave enough to actually enter a space like this and to be, a founder of a retreat center that's helping a lot of people. So good work, Jascha.
Dopamine.
Dopamine hit.
Thank you, Roxy.
Yeah.
I really liked the conversation. My second in English now. And I liked your attention. Like you really, your stare at me makes me feel heard.
I'm glad it makes you feel heard. Yes. Okay. Thank you.